So the engine wiring of our 5.9 Cummins in our F350, I'm sad to say I will have zero chance of being sponsored by D-Stroke and zero chance of ever being sponsored by Ford Motor Company. Both because I'm disappointed in both of them. The customer sent this wiring harness from the 5.9 Cummins Dodge and the engine harness from the 6-liter Power Stroke to D-Stroke, and they made him his own wiring harness that was supposed to be plug and play. I'm very disappointed in their abilities. They did not leave any wiring for the grid heater. They were not able to plug into the glow plugs that were originally in the Power Stroke. My light is coming on the dash, but there was no wiring for it, and they tell me that I need to put a push button on the dash to activate the grid heater. Very simple to wire in, but at least put the wires in there. They had these relays, and they had all the wiring for the grid heater. Just add it in the loom and make it nice and neat. So in doing so, they also did not leave any wiring for the alternator. They did not leave any wiring for the TPS, and in doing so, I had to cut their entire loom apart, redo pretty well everything, shorten the wires. The wires were way too long and messy, and really, if you guys want to tackle a job like this, you got to be able to understand the wiring of the engine. It's not very complicated at all. It's 3 wires to make it run, pull-in windings and hold-in windings, add a relay, and then just buy the tack from D-Stroke or Cummins Conversions, and you're able to do everything else yourself. If the wires don't go anywhere, like from your fuel injectors, cut them off. You don't need them anymore. So you need oil, coolant, TPS, alternator, so a live wire and a key wire going to your alternator, and then also your grid heater wires, and that's it. You've got 5.9 wired in. The 2-post batteries work really nice for the top post and the front. I'm able to just hook up the grid heater solenoids nicely to the front, while the stock Power Stroke wiring works nice for the top post. On top of that, the alternator, they tried to sell you a $400 alternator, single wire alternator. Don't do that. Just leave the Cummins alternator on there with the Dodge and add the external voltage regulator that Dodge themselves use that from I think 90 and older. You can buy those anywhere for 40 bucks, and you've got something to tell your alternator to charge and discharge. Your one wire can go right back to your, it's not hooked up yet. We'll do a completely separate video on how to make them charge, and just run one wire right over to your other side post on the battery. Very straightforward, and you've got your engine bay wired in. D-Stroke, I think, is owned by Ford, so Ford screws you in buying a Power Stroke, and then screws you again in buying a really expensive wiring harness and alternator that you don't need, when you can just watch some videos on YouTube and do it yourself. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. If I didn't explain anything good enough, let me know, and I'll make another video or I'll answer your questions. But don't buy your wiring harness from D-Stroke. So this is your tack signal. This is what you get from D-Stroke: 4 bolts, a drive gear, a spacer that goes in between the pulley and the drive gear, and then 2 bolts with spacers to mount your pickup. So what I did with my GMs is a Silverado. I just went to the wreckers. There's 5.3s everywhere, and cut this drive gear off of the crank and machined my own pulley to put on the front. And the Tahoe, because the engine had a head gasket issue, and I didn't know the history of the engine, it was pretty high mileage. I just cut it out of the one that I yanked out. So we'll throw this on. There's detents in here to center it, and then we'll have somewhere for each wire to go anyway. Here we go. When you're installing the timing gear cover for the tack on the front, just take the fan belt off and use the bolt supplied to put that gear on the front, and then just take a feeler gauge, and I'm going to start with 20 thou, put it in between the gear and the sensor, and it's a good start to see if to pick up your tack. If the needle's bouncing at all, you can go down maybe 15 or down to a 10 thou afterwards, but it's where I'm going to start anyway. And once you're done, you throw the fan belt back on again, you're golden. Here we go. So the oil pressure sensor is behind the injection pump, and of course it's O-ring Boss, whereas everybody else in the world uses a pipe thread. Screw you, Ford. So I just had to make this fitting. I didn't see any fitting in the kit that I got, so it was pipe on both sides. I just cut new threads in there for the O-ring Boss. Well, I don't know what threads they are. It was I just used a fine thread 7/16, and that seems to fit pretty nice. So I'll probably Loctite that in yet, but the O-ring should seal on the face here, and then that should work. So here we go. This is the sensor out of the Power Stroke, which is this fitting. This is the sensor out of the Cummins. You can see the thread size difference. Now that goes at the back of the head. This is just another engine sitting in the shop there, so that's the temperature. It's in the back of the head, which is a good spot for it because it's as far away from the rad as possible, and that's where you're going to get a hot spot first. There are sensors, temperature sensors in the intake here. This model doesn't have it, but some of them with the VE pump do have this this size temperature setting, but to my understanding that's just to check the air temperature coming into the engine, and will advance the timing on the injection pump on a cold start. So I had to go to town. I didn't have one, and just get an adapter fitting, and that'll allow this temperature fitting to go inside that if I had two hands, and then put it at the back of the head there, which is what I'm gonna do. So yeah, one more thing, it's not plug and play because you need this fitting as well. So here we go. So I just removed the overflow tank there and just ran the wires in behind and put that cover back on where the wiring's supposed to go, and then tuck the wire down here and put a clamp on it. Oh, it's kind of dark, but so then I cut all the loom off. That's my coolant temperature sensor, but here's my plug for it, which has those little tabs on it. So I got the wrong temperature sensor, probably because I didn't tell him the truck was white instead of blue. Ford likes making a whole bunch of different parts for the same engine and same years. I don't know why they do that. But anyway, this wiring is, even though the sensor is right back there, this is how long D-stroke leaves my wire. So you could actually plug it into the car beside you if you want, but we'll have to cut that a bit shorter so we can plug it in right beside the loom there, and then plug in the oil, and then we'll run it nicely up behind the injection pump, up and over, and then down to the crank sensor on the front there, and that should be it actually. And then the starter, let's see what I do with the starter yet. There we go. Okay, so finally have the right temperature sensor for our Ford here. Okay, our temperature sensor's in. Well, this relay to give your pull-in windings power has these big spade connectors. So what you can do is just take the cap off. Just two little tabs you flip over this little groove here, and then just cut a piece of tin and jam it. You can see where the windings pull in that little plate. Just take a little piece of tin and shove it in there, and that makes it have contact all the time, and then leave it long enough that it sticks to the end of the case, so when you pop the case back on, it can't go anywhere, and that relay is always live. So that fixes that problem. Pop that back in again. This is the preheater. Now D-Stroke had this in their hands. This actually got sent to D-Stroke. And they just decided not to put it in the loom because they did a half-assed job. So I also didn't think about it because my first time, and I forgot that to look for it. Honestly, my fault too, because I should have opened up their loom and added just the two wires just to keep it neat, but I ran new loom. It does go behind the rad tank behind here, so we'll stick it to the preheater, and then we'll put these actual relays in the fender, and then run a wire into the cab for the push button, and then that pretty well takes care of our engine compartment. We'll see if it starts up. All the gauges work, including tach, and then we'll start into the transmission. Here we go. off at about 20 thou on my RPM sensor, but I think it needs to be closer, so I'll try 15 thou and then go down from there. The engine light is on, but my check gauges light is off. The engine light, there is no way to get that light off. In the manual from both Cummins Conversion Specialist and D-Stroke, it says to put tape over the light, which is kind of embarrassing. Another thing that's embarrassing is less than 200,000 miles on this car, this truck, and it's already on another engine. But that's all working anyway. So we're gonna get into the transmission and then go from there. It sounds better than it ever did, that's for sure. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you love the channel, consider heading over to Patreon. There's a lot of stuff happening there to help support the channel. And remember, if you're not filthy, you're not rich.